Well, it's iPhone season, and you know what that means. On Tech Today, we have to take you across the iPhone lineup and actually tell you whether you should upgrade, or if you're not an iPhone user, whether you should invest in the Apple ecosystem. I can't just go on yapping about it. I have them in the flesh. The iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 Pro Max, the youngest sibling all the way till the eldest sibling. And yes, this is the new young sibling because Apple has discontinued the mini line. But before I tell you all of this, we have to show you what these phones are all about. So let's unbox them. One word: impressive. The minute you unbox these devices and hold them, the one in my right hand is the iPhone 14 in this blue color, and then you have the iPhone 14 Pro Max in deep purple in all its splendor. And boy oh boy, this is one very good looking phone. But on a quick first glance, yes, it's not very different from last year's 13 Pro Max, and that's not very different from the 12 Pro Max. But I do use a 12 Pro Max as a daily driver, and I have for a couple of years. I'll tell you about how these cameras have come a long way, and it's but obvious, even for someone who doesn't understand smartphones or photography. This is the 12 Pro Max. This is the 14 Pro Max. 2 generations away, a very capable device even today. If you have this, I'd still hold on to it. A very good looking device with a good color as well. And this is the biggest and the greatest and the latest from the Apple lineup. Look at the difference in the camera sensors. They got a lot bigger in the 13 Pro line, and now you can see how big they've become. This only means more light can come in. That also means better low light photography perhaps, and a lot more features that they've worked in the software side and on the hardware side as well. For instance, now you have cinematic mode on both these devices, which can go 4K 30 FPS. So if you were a 4K 24 FPS lover, now you can go all the way up to 30 FPS. I don't know how cinematic that is, but I think that is one upgrade. You also have on the selfie camera autofocus. So if I just turn this on right now, and you'll see, there you go. It's already catching me right there. Talking about the selfie camera, it takes a fairly decent shot. I have a lot of lights out on me here in the studio, and it's taken quite an accurate shot. Let's see what the iPhone 14 Pro Max does over here. Okay, there is a world of difference in the selfie camera. Or is it the display? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. Talking about the iPhone 14 cameras, of course it comes with 2 12-megapixel sensors like last year, a wide and an ultra-wide. And honestly, if you look at this phone, barring the color, it's exactly like the iPhone 13. And even if you're talking about the chipset, it comes with an A15 Bionic, which was on last year's iPhones. So for me, this is really an iPhone 13s and not necessarily an iPhone 14. That doesn't mean that people won't buy this phone. This is the iPhone 14, quintessentially the new iPhone, and now it's also the most affordable. So they've done away with the mini line Apple, but what they've done is, of course, the 14, and now there's a 14 Plus. This is 6.1 inches when you talk about the display, but if you want a 6.7 inch display, you don't want to shell out a kidney for this one, then you have an option now. It's called the iPhone 14 Plus. It comes with similar specs to this, but with more screen real estate. A little more expensive, but maybe that's something that you could consider. Now, the camera on the Pro and the Pro Max is where everything seems to have changed. And it's a big thing in the Apple world. If they've done away with the 12-megapixel triple camera setup, 2 cameras here are still 12 megapixel, but the primary sensor, the wide sensor, is now a 48-megapixel sensor. So are Apple now in the race to join all the Android guys with their hundreds of megapixels in the camera? Look, we've said this before, more megapixels don't necessarily mean a much better camera. Apple did a fantastic job with 12 megapixel sensors, optimizing them for the best performance. So now it'll be interesting to see what this 48 megapixel sensor can do. Just to give you some perspective, this is the Tech Today set, and I'm just checking. And honestly, I've taken a photo of the typical tech geek plant that we have on the set. let's do a comprehensive review on this, but it is a sharp, clean image which looks good on this display. Talking about the display, well, this is where all the magic happens in the Pro line. Not much like the standard line. These are still 60 Hz, though they're OLED now, thankfully. But the Pro line and the Pro Max, of course, are where you have a 120 Hz fluid OLED display. Honestly, you can't complain about this one. But last year's model was fantastic when it came to brightness. This, in bright light situations, gives you almost up to 2000 nits. Now that is unheard of in the smartphone world, and if Apple does it, I think they do a fairly decent job. When you talk about smartphone cameras and displays, iPhones and Samsung Galaxy Ultra flagships are where the real battle is at, so maybe that's a comparison we'll be doing very soon on Tech Today. Now if you go by all the chatter about these new cameras, then maybe Apple's just telling you to ditch all your gimbals and maybe even your GoPro and using your iPhone instead. That's because they now have an action mode on their video settings. What that essentially does is if you go on the camera and you're taking a shot where you're trying to chase a subject, there's a new button out here which activates action mode. But what it also does is that it sort of stabilizes everything, of course, gives you a gimbal-like smooth performance, but it also crops the shot a little bit. So beware in terms of what you're going for. Look, when it comes to smartphone photography, there's all sorts of opinions and preferences. Some of you may like how a pixel camera shoots. Some of you may like how Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra looks, the final output. And some of you all may prefer iPhones. But when we're talking about video, and a lot of us in television and on YouTube use all sorts of smartphones and devices, I genuinely believe that if a professional camera has to be replaced, then it has to be done on an iPhone. The undisputed video king in smartphones always seems to be an iPhone for me. Let's see how this 48 megapixel sensor actually performs versus the S22 Ultra in a subsequent episode. Wait. This review isn't over. One more thing. That's something we were waiting for at the Apple event. That didn't happen, but I'll give you one more thing on Tech Today. What I'm essentially going to talk about is an absolute masterstroke from the technology and marketing team at Apple. One for the software and hardware implementation of a feature that they called, and this is what we have to say kudos to their marketing team, Dynamic Island. I thought it was a very weird name at first, but once you've seen it in action, in the flesh, this is perhaps the most genius implementation, like I said, of technology by a tech company. So what is Dynamic Island? Remember how the older iPhones for the longest time had this notch up above? Well, now this is how the Pro Max looks. It's not the same with the 14, they still have that notch, but the Pro Max has this pill-shaped cutout, which still houses a Face ID sort of sensor, and then the selfie camera. The selfie camera does all the tricks that it always has and even more. So how does Dynamic Island really work? Remember how we used to have notifications when we used to scroll down? Now this pill-shaped cutout houses all those notifications, but a lot of them come with added functionalities, maybe 20-30 new features, makes this particular notch or pill-shaped cutout expand software-wise, and then you can hard press them using haptics and get all sorts of functionality. For instance, if I play this song right now, and if I swipe up and I go to the main screen, automatically you see this black portion has expanded. Now, if I were to do something else, perhaps put the phone on charging, again, the charging indicator would light up. And I want to do more over here, right? So why stop there? Why settle? Hit the timer on or the stopwatch. Go back again, and there you go. The stopwatches come here as well. Now this looks like just a gimmicky sort of notification bar. No, it's not. This is literally a manager, and I'll tell you how. You hard press it, and there you go. You can pause the track, you can change the song, all of that. You go back, again, you come right there. You click it once, and it opens up the app that was showing up over there, which I think is great as well. So I'm going to go there and cancel the timer, swipe up, and you realize Dynamic Island is shut now. Again, if you start the timer, just to show it to you again, it's showing up right there. This works for a bunch of things when your wireless charging, there's notifications, all sorts of cool things, and third-party apps are supported. And I'm sure on subsequent updates of iOS 16, we'll see a lot more use cases as well. So as I said, this dynamic island was an absolute masterstroke from Apple. Well done. At nearly 80,000 rupees, if you have an iPhone older than the iPhone 11 and you're gearing up for India's 5G revolution, the iPhone 14 is a great place to start. But if you want the latest and greatest and perhaps the best video camera ever on a smartphone, then I think this is a good contender for all your money. Well, a moment of silence whilst I adore this deep purple color, which I never thought I would like on a smartphone or any sort of technology device. But it's strange, every time light hits it from different angles, it looks like a different shade of purple. So I think Apple has gotten that right. But what about the absolute powerhouse that is packed inside this beautiful deep purple body? Well, the iPhone 14 Pro Max might have changed a little bit on the outside, but it's certainly changed when you're talking about what's on the inside. But if you're going to be shelling out the big bucks, nearly 140,000 rupees for the base Pro Max model, then I gotta tell you something, your bank account is going to be wiped out, but you will own one of the best iPhones yet.